Life. What is this thing that we call life, this great grand mystery? And what is the purpose of it? I think that humans have probably been noodling on those questions since there first were humans. It is something that our species comes back to regularly. And these questions, I think, captivate and mystify us. Life is precious, it's miraculous, it's invisible, and yet obviously it's everywhere. It's a creative force that courses through each of us and all of creation, every single being on this planet. And as advanced as science is becoming, it can't actually just explain how life sparks into being. Life just is. Now, Unity has a body of teachings based on 12 spiritual powers. These include things like faith and release and love, and life is one of those 12 powers. It's my understanding that Unity co-founder Myrtle Fillmore is who actually hatched this whole concept of 12 powers, and then her husband Charles really expanded upon it. And I want to read a quote from Charles Fillmore. I believe this is in his book called The 12 Powers of Man. He says, quote, "The first step in the realization of life is always to know that God is life, abundant, omnipresent, eternal. And the second step is to make positive connection with God life by declaring oneness with it." Now, for me, that starts to beg the question, what is God? And I think that the answer to that is very personal. And given, I think it's based on our own experiences, whatever mystical experiences we might have, spiritual maturation as we go along. It's based on, I think, at least speaking from the I, my concept of God has shifted significantly. And having been raised in a very dualistic, dogmatic, religious pathway, I would be highly skeptical of anybody who says they have a lock on what God is. And I am not about to do that. But what I want to talk about a little bit is my own experience and my evolving understanding of the divine. I find it extremely helpful to noodle on this a little bit in my own personal journey of moving past a dualistic concept of God, a God out there somewhere, which is definitely not what Unity teaches. So I've had a few mystical experiences that have really profoundly impacted my understanding of the divine and my understanding of what we as human beings are as well. And I want to tell you about one of them. This was a few years ago. I live in Bend, Oregon. It's beautiful here. It's high desert, mountainous. And I was walking along the Deschutes River in Ponderosa Pine Forest. It was a beautiful sunny day, and the sun was like, dancing off the sparkling water. And I suddenly came completely into the present moment. I had no thinking at all of the past, no thinking forward toward the future. I was completely present. And in that moment, I lost the sense of physical boundary between myself, between my body and all the rest of creation. And I felt what I now call the matrix of life. I felt in a very real and tangible way that I was in an integral part of this divine web of life. And I could literally kind of move this matrix with my thinking and my being. These are very, very hard experience. All mystical experiences are very, very hard to put in to words, and lots and lots and lots of people have them. That experience for me was like a tumbler clicking into place, and it enabled me to take the next big step beyond the concept of God as a separated out there being. Now, I think one of the paradoxes, one of the challenges that many of us who are walking a non-dualistic spiritual path, like unity, like New Thought, is that if God is not an entity, but is rather a principle or a force, does that mean that God is impersonal? And if it's not a being, how do we relate to it? How do we praise it? How do we ask for help when we might feel like we're needing it? I have found that this understanding of God as the matrix of creation is absolutely not impersonal at all. I can sit in the sense of my absolute oneness with this incredible life force and still feel personally recognized, still feel like that force recognizes the individuality that I also am. I feel as if I can converse with it. You know, one of the great shifts in teachings, another of these Unity 12 powers that I want to touch on really quick, is will. And what I'm coming to understand, this is a whole different talk I could give, but what I'm coming to understand when we talk about free will and God's will and all of this stuff that gets gobbledygooked in a lot of religious dogma, when we are in a state of oneness with creation, God's will is literally one with us. God's will is literally our will. And I think that this is what Charles Fillmore was referring to when he said, quote, making positive connection with God life by declaring oneness with it. I think this is why unity is such an empowering and empowered way of interacting with the divine. We literally can, when we step into and fully open to that oneness, we can literally have the will of God and the power of God life moving forward with us, rolling that river that is us with it. I think that's incredibly powerful. At every moment, the memory of God and our own godness is shining somewhere in the horizons of our minds. We just have to notice. Can you feel that right now? Can you take just a second and drop the past, drop the do list, drop present, future concerns, and just feel that godness that is shimmering, that memory, that ancient memory of what really is and what we really are. That's a powerful meditation, by the way. So I want to shift back now. What is God? Talked a little bit about will. I want to shift back to this spiritual power of life. How can we, as spiritual beings, having a human part of our journey, how can we optimize this power of life as a spiritual principle? Because life as a spiritual principle goes far beyond physical bodies, ours or anyone else. Now, yes, there's an animating force of life that is in biology. It's in these bodies. But as a principle, this concept of life, what it is, what the meaning is, goes way beyond that. It's not finite at all. I want to read a quick thing from Linda Martell Whitsitt's book, Divine Audacity, which is a whole book about one of many, many books about 12 powers. This is her take on it. And she writes specifically about the power of life. Life is of divine origin. Life is eternal and indestructible, in keeping with the first law of thermodynamics, which is that energy cannot be created or destroyed. Although invisible and non-material evidence of life can be sensed, life exists in potential and requires intentionality or direction. And she goes on to write, this is kind of provocative, I think. Life is not a creation of the body. The body cannot create or destroy life. Life gives rise to the body. Invisible life takes shape, invisible forms. Life is not a creation of the body. It is something much beyond that. There's an animating power to this principle of life. It has an ever onward, upward impulse. It's demonstrated in the natural world that is always about striving for more life, creation, and abundance. That nature, you guys are in Alaska. I mean, my goodness gracious, you see it. Bend is pretty fantastic, but Alaska, you have just abundant. You have nature as a teacher up there in a glorious way. And that's something that we can tap into to recognize that demonstration, to bring more of that animation into our own lives. And it's this life force is even present, certainly in the natural world, in things that look dead. You think about what a dead tree in the forest. I have a background in environment and ecology. That's my real shtick. That's really my ministry. But a dead tree, especially in like temperate forests, which is what Central Oregon and certainly Alaska are, they actually call those nursery trees, because when those trees die, all the micro fungi on it and the microorganisms, that becomes a fertile bed for the next generation after generation after generation of life. You see all the ferns on these. You see the new little baby trees sprouting off these nursery trees. It's just one example after another that life is ever ongoing in every single cycle and season of our own lives. I think that's a powerful thing to think about. I love the concept of, a drop of water in this ever abundant life. It gets flipped off a wave in the ocean and taken up into cloud. It forms into clouds. The clouds bump into mountains. It then drops as rain. That very same molecule of water drops as rain. It flows into a river and lake. We and other beings drink it. Then we pee and it goes out again and gets flushed down through groundwater, eventually flowing all the way back down to rejoin that ocean. It is the ever ongoing circle and system of life begetting more life. Through the spiritual power of life, this animating force, we can tap into incredible power. And I don't think the opposite of life is death. I think the opposite of life as a spiritual principle is stagnation. It's stalling out. It's not animating ourselves to really live these extraordinary experiences that we have come into. A Course in Miracles teaches that the purpose of life, this human part of our life, is to obtain freedom. And I would say freedom in our thinking, and to be able to fully extend creation. That's the purpose of this human part of our journey, I do believe, is to sort of reclaim our minds and reclaim, therefore, our free will. And we do that by remembering more and more and more as we move along what we truly are, the power that we truly have before us. And this animating principle of life is one aspect of that. Now, when we're not being intentional with our thinking, A Course in Miracles also says a lot that, we're here for creation, but when we're not being intentional, we're often miscreating. I don't know about y'all, but I have lots of evidence of that in my life. I think I'm getting better at it as we go forward, but nonetheless, so it's all about being intentional with this animating power of life and harnessing that so that we can expand in any season of life that we're in, so that we can expand our creativity and extend creation. Another aspect of life, there's the animating force, and another aspect is vitality, which is described as the capacity to thrive. Now, I don't believe that that is just about vitality in our physical capacity. You know, you think of people like Stephen Hawking, who, due to horrendous disease, was literally almost completely paralyzed, physically paralyzed, wheelchair bound his entire life. But his mind was vital, and his brilliant physicist mind changed our world and made him famous and revered. He had a vitality that went way beyond and was not tied to just a physical body. So I ask you, in thinking about this, I ask you just to ask the kind of tough question of yourself. Are you playing small? Are you allowing this life energy to drain away from your creation, from what you have to offer? Are you so focused on limitations that you're not experiencing the animation, not being intentional with the vitality? Are you choosing not to thrive, but just to survive? That one resonates with me because I had kind of I had many challenges in the young part of my life, and I had developed an identity that was very much tied to being a survivor and being tough. And I am all of that. But that is so limiting. I finally, largely because of our Unity and New Thought teachings, I got to the point where I was like, hell no, just surviving is not good enough for me. I claim that I am a thriver. And I invite you right now to say that out loud with me. Come on now. I am a thriver. That is one way of tapping into this principal power of life. Now, humans tend to really complicate things. This talk may be an example of that, trying to drill down on this isness that is life. But spiritual life involves creative expression and growth and extension of love. It is the divine presence expressing through each and every one of you, each and every one of us, the divine presence that is expressing through all beings, human and otherwise, all creation. In his book, Christian Healing, Charles Fillmore also wrote, and I want to read this quote, "There is," he says, "intelligence inherent in every form, animate or inanimate. It has been discovered that even rocks and all minerals have life. We should be speaking words of truth to everything, not only to mankind, but to the mineral, vegetable, and animal kingdoms." That speaks to me as someone who believes that humans are not the only species that has a lock on this creation or has a lock on this planet, for goodness sakes. That speaks to me a lot. And again, I like this topic of life because nature does offer just so many incredible and powerful examples to learn from. This incredible planet that we're on, it has been estimated that there is somewhere on the order of 8.7 million different species on Earth. But so far, only just under 1.5 million have been identified and cataloged by humans. Think about that. There's maybe 8.5 million species. We think we're so smart. We think we have it together. We've only actually recognized and identified maybe 1/8 of that, which gives me tremendous hope because clearly we are at a place where humanity is having a tremendous, often negative impact on other species. But there's a lot of resilience. There's a lot of life force built into this planet that we're inhabiting. And as humanity regains our sanity and remembers that we are a part of and not a part from nature, she's going to respond. She's going to heal. She's going to rebound. There's a cool story about this and about the life force. Many of us who were raised in the Western worldview, certainly in Western scientific teaching, we've been raised with the whole, quote, Darwinian notion of competition and survival of the fittest, when actually what nature at the level of just life begetting life demonstrates much more than survival of the fittest as in competition is cooperation and collaboration. And there's this cool story that I learned about just about a year ago here in Oregon. There's this little blue butterfly called the Fender's blue. It lives only in one valley in Oregon, and it was believed to be extinct, but has now had a resurgence due to conservation efforts. They started planting the very few native plants that this butterfly feeds on that had been wiped out. They started bringing back the native plants, and this species is really rebounding now. Here's a very cool thing about this. When it's in its worm phase, this is a very small butterfly, and its caterpillar phase is very small and very vulnerable. And this butterfly has developed a relationship with a number of ant species. And when that little worm is threatened by an bigger insect or something coming after it, it will send out a certain scented pheromone and or twist its body in this really fast little jerky move that puts out this certain high-pitched sound. And when that happens, any of the ants nearby will run to its defense, and they'll make like this defensive barrier. And as it shakes out, then that little butterfly or that little caterpillar will secrete a little bit of like sugary, like a little drop of secretion that the ants then eat. And they thrive in symbiosis. Their life, the life force within them, is made stronger through diversity and through this collaboration and competition. And I think that that's a powerful thing to consider at this juncture that you and I and everyone alive right now are going through in our relationships and in our relationship at the scale that we're at now. I think I titled this talk "The Meaning of Life," and I started with that. What is the meaning? What is the purpose? And I now say, I don't know if everything has a purpose, but I do know that we can make purpose of everything that happens. And I think one aspect, I think that the answer to what is the meaning of life is at least as personal as the question, what is God? What is your view of God? But certainly it feels to me like one aspect of the meaning of being alive right now, because we are alive in human form, in precious and precarious and extraordinary times. And it's challenging because we're aware of some of the painful things that are happening. We're aware of that on a scale we've never been aware of it before. It's also extraordinary because we're more empowered than ever to do something about that or to do something for ourselves. We can get onto the internet, for goodness sakes, and dial up information about almost anything that we feel called to learn about. It's an extraordinary time. And I believe that an important, not just a feel good, but also an important aspect of the meaning of life is just to celebrate the fact that we have one, to celebrate the fact that we get to experience it, and that we get to experience with fellow human beings and all the other species, and that we have, for whatever reason, on our ongoing eternal spiritual journeys, we've come into life at this particular moment. I think we're all here for a reason, for right now, for facing exactly what we're facing right now on this planet. And that's why I also think it's incredibly important that we move in our consciousness past just surviving to a focus on thriving. So I want to end there, and I just want to invite each of you, we're going to go into a meditation here in a moment. I just want to invite each of you, especially if it feels uncomfortable, to say again, surviving is not enough for me. Surviving is not enough for my planet. I say yes to thriving. Namaste.